Hello guys, and welcome to today's class. In today's class, we'll be considering the topic tissues and supporting systems. In all our previous topics, we've been considering living things, basically the plants and animals. So in today's topic, I'll just give a little introduction and we would kickstart from there. Living organisms include plants and animals, and these plants and animals need tissues as well as supporting systems to enable and carry out life processes, such as we have movement. I'll just list some life processes that these tissues and systems help the living organism to carry out. We have respiration, nutrition, and etc. So these tissues and supporting systems help living things to be able to carry out all these life processes. For example, now without the various bones and tissues, vertebrates may not be able to stand or respire or move or carry out other life processes. So many multicellular organisms, especially plants and animals, also need to support their bodies in some ways to enable them to maintain their shape. So these tissues and supporting systems are very important in living organisms. Skeleton. Now, the skeleton is the bony framework of the body. Is the bony framework of the body. Now, and the skeleton gives support, gives shape, as well as protection to not just the soft tissues of the body, but also all the organs in the body. Now, without the skeleton, animals may not be able to move or carry out other life processes. Why? Because the skeleton enables them to move from one place to another. And the skeleton, depending on the position of certain organisms in the evolutionary trend, helps them to determine the advancement and development of this organism. For example, man is able to stand erect than other organisms due to its sophisticated skeletal build-up. So the skeleton, as we've seen in animals, is very, very important, as it helps them to do quite a number of meaningful things. Now we'll be looking at the forms and components of skeletal materials. Now, what are the things that make up this skeleton? What are the materials that make up this skeleton? The first we'll be looking at is chitin. Now we'll be looking at the forms and components of skeletal materials. That's to say the things that make up this skeleton, its component. And the number one we'll be looking at is corticals. And this cortical is composed of chitin. The chitin is made of protein and is of wax material, which is waterproof. And this chitin is a non-living substance. It's a non-living substance and can grow by ecdysis. We have it here. It grows by ecdysis or molting. Now, and this ecdysis or molting is a process whereby organisms shed off its old skeleton and put on new one. So in other words, for an organism to grow, it has to put out the old one, then bring forth a new one. Now, this cortical, example of organisms with this type of skeletal material are mainly arthropods. Spell it here. Arthropods. Example of these are insects. You have insects, you have crabs, you have scorpions, and etc. So these organisms are made up of cortical. Okay, now form and component of skeletal number 2, we have the bones. Now, as you can see, the bone is a major component of the vertebral skeleton. It consists of living bone cells, and the living bone cells are called osteocytes. Then it has the collagen, that's the protein fibers, and minerals. And these minerals that are composed of the bone are mainly calcium phosphate. they are underlined here, and calcium carbonate. And don't forget, the minerals are the non-living components of the bone. Now, as a result, bone is a stronger and more rigid tissue than cartilages, which is the point number 3 now. A bone usually consists of a hard outer layer, that's a shaft, and a spongy or hollow cavity filled with bone marrow. Now, example of organisms which have bones are mainly vertebrates. The organisms are vertebrates. And vertebrates such as fishes, bony fishes, bony fish, toads, lizards, etc. So all these organisms are organisms that have bones in them. And point number 3, we have the cartilage, and this is also tissue found in the skeleton and consists of living cells. Now, these living cells of the cartilages are called chondroblasts, and they also have carbohydrates and proteins fiber in it. Now, if you look, one important characteristic of the cartilage is that it's a tough and flexible tissue. It is tough but flexible and has great tensile strength. Its tensile strength is very great. Now, because of this tensile strength, it acts as a shock absorber, cushioning the effect of bones moving against bones during movement. Now, example of organisms which possess cartilages are, example here, are cartilaginous fishes like have sharks, rays, and mammals. So we'll move to the next thing. So these are the forms and components skeletal material. Now we'll move to types of skeleton. We have 3 types. So we'll take the first one, which is hydrostatic or fluid skeleton. Now, this type of skeleton are usually possessed by soft-bodied animals. And how do they move? They move with the aid of fluid pressure. Don't forget, from the top here, hydrostatic has to do with water or fluid. Now, they use fluid pressure to provide support, which helps them as a form of skeleton. And the fluid is secreted into the body, and the fluid presses against the muscular wall, and you have the step how it helps to generate this fluid pressure to provide support for it, and it helps the animal to maintain its shape and the form of the animal. Example of organisms with this type of skeleton are earthworms. You have earthworm here, anemones. You have them here. So these are example of organisms that uses hydrostatic skeleton. That's they use fluid pressure to be able to maintain or give themselves support. The second type of skeleton as we have is exoskeleton. Exo means outside. We already know the definition of skeleton, so exo means outside. So this type of skeleton is found outside the body of the animals, and most invertebrates do possess cortical, which is exposed or composed of chitin. Now, like we said earlier, chitin is a non-living substance found covering the outer part of the body. Now, such external skeletal tissues encloses, support, gives shape, protection, and also enables the animal to move. So these are exoskeleton. Now, example of organisms with exoskeleton are invertebrates. Like we said, most invertebrates are the ones that possess exoskeleton. So let me just write it here. We have invertebrates, invertebrates like Euglena. You have Euglena. We have Hydra, tapeworm, crayfish, and etc. So these and many more organisms possesses exoskeleton. Now, organisms with this type of skeleton can only grow by process called molting or ecdysis. We've explained it when we talk about forms and components of the bone, so you can refer to that slide and get more explanation on that. So we quickly move to the third type of skeleton, which is endoskeleton. So from the word endo means to be inside, so this type of skeleton is found inside the body of the animals. And endoskeleton exists in bony or cartilaginous skeleton. Now, example of them are fishes, you have toads, you have your lizards, birds, and mammals. So endoskeleton is largely found in vertebrates, or those found in vertebrates made up of cartilages and bones. So, and the endoskeleton in mammals are the skull, the vertebral column, the backbone, ribs, and the bones of the fore and hind limbs. So the next slide, we have the picture of a skeleton. And if you remember the previous slide talking about in the skeleton, this is skeleton of man, which is found inside. And if you remember when we labeled it, we have the skull, as you can see here. The skull, just pardon me, let me just give it a quick like this. So you have this is the skull, then you have the backbone. The backbone is here. Is your backbone. You have your ribs. Well, these are the ribs, you can see them here. We have the pelvic girdle and every other part of the skeleton. So as we progress in the topic, we'll get to take a quick detailed look at some of these parts, what they are made of and their functions, and we'll give some of their name as we proceed. Now, both of the axial and appendicular skeleton, because the axial and appendicular make up the complete skeleton as we've seen in the previous slide. So we'll take them one after the other and explain them briefly and in details. Now, we will start with the axial skeleton. And the axial skeleton, as we have here, and it's made up of the skull, the vertebral column, or the backbone, which is number 2, the ribs 3, and the sternum or the breastbone number 4. So these 4 parts is what makes up the axial skeleton. And let me quickly just touch on the skull. Now, the mammalian skull is made up of several flat bones which are joined together by means of joints called suctures. So the joints that joins the skull together are called the suctures. Now, there are 3 major parts of the skull. The 3 major parts of the skull. One, we have the cranium. 2, we have the facial bones. And 3, we have the jaw. So the cranium is also known as the brain box, because and this is what holds or contains the brain. The brain is contained in the cranium, I call it brain box, while the facial bones supports the nose, the eyes, and muscles of the cheeks, while the jaw is made up of the upper jaw, that's known as maxilla, and the lower jaw, known as mandible. Mandible. So these are the three major parts of the skull, and some little functions of the skull. It protects the brain, it gives shape to the head, it protects vital organs of the head such as the eyes, the nose, the ears, and it also bears teeth which aids grinding of food to aid or help digestion. So next we'll look at the vertebral column as part of the axial skeleton, and we said the vertebral column is also known as the backbone or the spinal column. So whichever you call it, either you call it the vertebral column, the backbone, or spinal column, they are all correct. They are all names for vertebral column, and this is central in supporting the structure of the skeleton. The vertebral columns now forms the backbone of vertebrate animal, and is very, very important because it protects the spinal cord. Very, very important. So now it is made up of 5 groups of bones called vertebrae, and the singular is vertebra, the plural is vertebrae. So at the next slide we'll just consider the 5 bones. We'll consider the 5 bones, 5 different bones of the vertebrae Now we have them here 1 to 5. The first one is the cervical vertebrae, and it's found in the neck region. The second is the thoracic vertebrae. It's found in the chest region. The third is the lumbar vertebrae. It's found in the upper abdomen. The fourth is the sacral vertebrae. It's found in the lower abdomen, while some other school of thought will tell you it's found at the waist, while the lumbar, the upper and abdomen, some school of thought is found in the stomach, while this one at the waist. Then caudal vertebrae is found in the tail region. So these are the 5: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and caudal, and they are found at the neck region, chest region, upper abdomen, lower abdomen, and tail region respectively. So below we have a table that shows us the number of the types as well as number of these vertebrae in man, rabbit, and rat, the 3 of them together. Now for cervical, for man we have 7 cervical vertebrae. For thoracic, man has 12, lumbar has 5, sacral 5, and caudal 4, which gives a total of 33. So the vertebral column in man is 33 in number, while for rabbit ranges from 45 to 46 depending on the number of sacral it has, while for rat is between 57 to 60 depending on the number of caudal vertebrae that it has. Now we'll be looking at the second part of the skeleton. We said is made of axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. So here we'll be looking at the appendicular skeleton. Now the appendicular skeleton is made up of the limb girdles. The limb girdles are, an example of the limb girdles are pectoral and pelvic girdles, and also made up of the limbs, and the limbs are forelimbs and the hind limbs. So we'll take first the pectoral girdle and the pelvic respectively, and we'll touch on them very briefly. Now the pectoral girdle is found around the shoulder in man, and it's made up of 2 halves which are held by muscles. Now, and each of these halves made up of 3 bones, made up of the scapula or shoulder blade, clavicle or collarbone, and coracoid. Now made up of these 3. So this example of a pelvic girdle. Now you see this is the scapula. Here you have your scapula, you have your you have your coracoid here, and this one is a pectoral girdle of a rabbit that we have here. But mind you, just know that each half of the girdle is made up of 3 bones: the scapula or the shoulder blade, 1, then the second one is the clavicle or collarbone, 2, and the third is coracoid. So these are the 3 parts that makes up the pectoral girdle. Now the next is the pelvic girdle, which is found around the waist in man. It consists of 2 halves, as you can see from the diagram here. It has 2 halves which are joined together ventrally to the sacrum dorsally. Now each half is made up of 3 bones too. As you can see, we have the 3 bones as listed here as ilium, ischium, and pubis. So we have them here. This is the ilium 1, we have our ischium 2, and our pubis 3. So these are the 3 bones of the pelvic girdle that each half is made of. Okay, lastly, on the appendicular skeleton, we'll be looking at the limbs. The limbs are made up of 4 limbs. That's the 4 limbs are the bones of the hands, and the hind limbs are the bones of the legs. Now the limbs of most vertebrates are built on the same basic plan, and the basic plan is the pentadactyl limb plan. The penta means 5, so it means 5 digits plan. Now it's made up of a long bone followed by a pair of 2 long bones which lie side by side. Now as you can see in the diagram, a long bone followed by 2 long bones that lie side by side. Now the pair of these long bones is followed by a set of 9 small bones which are arranged in 3 rows. You can see them in 3 rows. This is the first row, second, third, and they are all 9 together. The 9 small bones are followed by 5 digits. 5 digits. Each digit is made up of small bones called phalanges. So now we'll be considering this diagram. Now it's of 2 sides. Remember, we said the limbs is made up of the 4 limbs and heel limb. So this section, if we divide this diagram vertically through, now this side of this is the 4 limbs, while this is the hind. This side is the hind limbs. Now for the 4 limbs, we said they are the bones of the hands, while the hind limbs are the bones of the legs. So you can see them. Now the bones of the hands, now this long bone here, this one where I have my cursor, this part here that I just shade red, is called the humerus. That's for the hands. That's the upper one, is called humerus. While for the leg, that's the hind limbs, now is called femur. That's the thigh bone, femur. Now why these 2 bones here that lie side by side in the 4 limbs, that's the lower arm, they are called radius and ulna. Why in the hind limbs, that's bones of the leg, it's called fibula and tibia. Now coming down to these 9 bones arranged in 3 rows, for the 4 limbs they are called the carpals. That's the wrist bone. While for the hind limbs they are called tarsals. That's the ankle bone. Now coming down to this 5 digits plan we have here, for the 4 limbs they are called metacarpals. That's for the palm, metacarpals. While for the hind limbs they are called metacarpals too, and metatarsals. I beg your pardon, they are called metatarsals for the hind limbs. That's the bones of the foot. While lastly, this other set of 5 bones are arranged together in 3 rows, as you can see here. For the 4 limbs they are called digits. That's the fingers and the thumb, they are called digits. While for the hind limbs they are also called digits, but these are for the toes. So this diagram we have here just capture both the 4 limbs and hind limbs, so you get the ideas of their bones and the way they are arranged, the unit. So please you get this and listen to it carefully, follow it. You can get any good biology textbook, it will see through more light on this, and you can even have all these bones alone standing on their own with their various label, and you try to understand it very well.